Bushwhacks were some of the worst days I've ever had in the mountains, or life, really.
And I tell people all the time, never underestimate the Catskills. You can't underestimate them.
Why the Catskills is such a great place for trout.
It was really the development of New York State. Catskills were responsible.
Yeah.
Now you're listening to Inside the Line, the Catskills.
All right, so Dave, crazy weather we're having these days, huh?
Yeah, it's really weird. I think most of us would rather have some kind of snow, instead of the endless gray, and it's been cold. It's been cold enough. It's funny because if it was sunny, it wouldn't feel so cold.
Yeah.
It's that damp wetness, as I like to say.
Yeah, the humidity in the air when we usually don't have humidity at this time of year.
Right.
It's a little annoying. Yeah, right now it's pouring rain here in Oneonta, so I don't know what it's doing down Woodstock.
Well, it's sweet. It started out freezing rain. It was just rain, and now it's sleet.
Ah, God, back and forth with stuff that we don't want.
Yep, exactly.
Well, with that, of course, I just got this a couple days ago about a rescue up on Giant Ledge. An air rescue, actually, which was very, very crazy. My friend, I heard about it online, of course, and then my friend sent me some information. So
it must have been a little too interesting, but at least it's an open enough place that they could do that,
Yeah, and that's what I said. And it's a popular place, so they're probably already ready. They're standby right there.
What's interesting about that is it goes all the way back to my roots, because my dad was one of the very first parajumpers in the Air Force.
Oh, wow.
And when they first started the Air Force Air Rescue, that others may live. And it's exactly what they used to do.
Yeah. Yeah. It was definitely a crazy situation. So what I got from my friend online, he said that, the DEC said that on January 15th at 12:05 p.m., Ulster County 911 requested forest ranger assistance with the rescue of a hiker with a lower leg injury on Giant Ledge. 3 rangers rescued the 70-year-old guy, splinted their legs, and then packaged them out and carried them out with fire departments from Big Indian, Clareville, and Pine Hill. They had a half-mile carol out, and they ended at approximately 4:30. Then, during that incident, 2 rangers had to be rerouted back to Giant Ledge and responded to another injured hiker on the trailhead. Same hiking party, but closer to the trailhead, so they were separated for some reason. This was a 71-year-old male suffered a head injury from the fall and was airlifted to the hospital. Trail conditions were definitely icy, so that brings up 2 questions. Well, it brings up one statement: bring your spikes no matter what, from beginning of November to the end of April, May. I mean, That's a given.
Yep.
Now, Dave, I don't know what you think of this. It's kind of tough in New York State, but I really think that they should be billed for this as of right now until we get some sort of program going like they have in New Hampshire, the Hike Safe Card. I really think that's a great idea. But what is your opinion? Or if you don't want to share it, you don't have to.
No, I agree. The only thing, because I've studied that for a while, and only thing about that is I wonder how many people would therefore try to self-rescue. You really you bring up like really some even more stupid stuff. But I agree, there has to be a way to make people aware that there is a price to pay for this behavior in many different levels. Sometimes the price is for other people to pay, the rescuers that put themselves in great danger.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And I understand not everybody that needs rescuing was just plain stupid.
Yeah.
Stuff happens. It's the real world out there. But what you and I and what we're all talking about is people that should know better. Look, basic common sense, a little self-education on the matter, and just putting other people in danger.
Yeah, it's there's we have the internet here, and that gets a boatload of information, and I sometimes wonder how these people do not know of the stuff you should bring on with you when you're doing a winter hike, when you're doing regular hikes and stuff, just because of the internet and how filled of information it is with everything. So it gets to be really big question.
Absolutely. I've been a member of the Catskills Center for many years, and I'm I've been a volunteer at the fire tower at the visitor center. And I think it's great how the Catskill Center and the visitor center, they pump out trail information. They're trying to educate people on exactly this stuff, and both at over the counter and online. And maybe over time it'll start sticking more.
Yeah.
Maybe this is only just beginning.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it'll stick in people's heads, like you said, and we won't be like New Hampshire and Vermont and the Adirondacks. I mean, we'll see. But also with your hiking experience and with your times being a known hiker, have you ever heard of what they call PUDs? Purposeless up and downs.
I hadn't.
Yeah, same here. My friends on another podcast, sounds like a search and rescue podcast from New Hampshire. He's like, this hike is full of PUDs, and one of the person's like, what is a PUD? He goes, purposeless up and down. So I'm like, never heard of that before. That's pretty good. I'm like, I like it. I don't know. We don't have too many of those here in the Catskills, do we?
Oh, exactly. What is it? What do they mean? Just people just going out without any reason, or any rationale?
I think it's about, having like a way up to the top easier, and then there's another way that you go that has like bumps and bumps and bumps instead of getting the way easier up to the top of the mountain. So I'm guessing it's purposeless up and down elevation gains to where they're not needed.
Huh.
So I'm not familiar with many of those here in the Catskills. So
right.
I don't think we don't have any of those. I mean, any mountain you look at, it goes straight up to the mountain. There's no purposeless up and down here.
Yeah. I'm still not exactly clear what they mean by that, but I suspect we'll find out.
Yeah, exactly. So excellent. So welcome everybody to episode 62 of Inside the Line, the Catskills. I have Catskill legend here, Dave Holden. He has been in the Catskills for a very long time. He is very educated, well in the Catskills, very long time Woodstock native, and he is very educated on ancient trails in the Catskills, ancient log roads, special phenomenons in the Catskills. Like we talked about the last 2 episodes ago, was the cairns, the massive Native American cairns. So I decided, I was like, hey, it would be great to get Dave on here. We talk about history all the time. People love the history of the Catskills, so I brought Dave on. So say hello, Dave.
Well, thank you very much, Stash. Really good to be on here. I really appreciate this. And any questions you have, I'll answer the best I can.
Hell yeah. Or you'll just answer them with good fun. That's all I care.
Exactly.
Yeah. So thank you to the monthly supporters, Darren White, Vicky Ferreira, John Comiskey, Jim C., Michael Bogner, David Mead, Matt Smith, and Sharon Client. Thank you for supporting the show. Also, a big thank you to Outdoors Chronicle Photography for being the sponsor of the show. Molly from Outdoor Chronicles Photography specializes in adventure elopement and adventure coupled photography in the Catskills, Adirondacks, and White Mountains. And also don't forget your pets. They are just as important. She is also an officiant for getting married and a licensed guide. So don't hesitate to get a hold of Molly on all platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever you need. Get a hold of her. She's got her own website. She's an awesome woman. So thank you, Molly, for supporting the show.
Adventure elopement. That sounds great.
That does sound good, doesn't it? She has some fantastic photos of people. I'm pretty sure there was a couple photos of Mount Marcy, of her eloping someone on Mount Marcy and Holden and stuff. She does a lot of stuff in the Adirondacks. It's beautiful stuff.
Good.
So let's coffee talk. Karen Biscoff, thank you for donating 5 coffees. I really appreciate it. Glad you're enjoying the show. Karen said, thank you for this great podcast. I love all the information I receive while listening. Hey, anytime. I'm having a fun time. And I love talking about the Catskills, preach about the Catskills. So Dave, you been on any previous hikes that you want to talk about in the Catskills, like in the past couple weeks?
Nothing serious. Lightweight stuff. Haven't had a whole lot of time. It's been a while since I've even been up Overlook, and I have my own route. I drive around Cooper Lake every few days. I never get tired of Cooper Lake, and then I'll walk around it as far as I feel like going. Again, every form of weather is just always beautiful. I have thousands of pictures of Cooper Lake. I feel dumb sometimes. I know I've taken this picture before, but you got to do it. I go down, and then I go down to Reservoir One, look for my eagle friends down there that I've been monitoring for almost 15 years now.
Oh, wow.
I have to go up and monitor, check out the Bird Cliff Trail, which I built for the Guild about 10 years ago.
Oh, nice. I like that trail. I've been there.
Yeah, and I'm really happy. I'm really happy with it. I worked for the CETA crew rebuilding buildings at Bird Cliff when Eileen Cromer, Woodstock artist, was a daughter of another famous Woodstock artist, and she was the crew chief of the trail crew that built the Guardian Trail. Goes in from Camelot Road.
Oh, nice.
And I actually would like to see the Guardian Trail. I'd like to see its name changed to the Eileen Cromer Trail. And the Guild approached me 10 years ago. They were getting a lot of complaints from neighbors along Camelot Road, which is private. I can understand that in a way. But people driving all the way in there to go to the trailhead, the Guardian Trailhead, would I find a way to make a trail from around the theater to go up and intersect it? And that's what I did. It was
nice.
A lot of fun. I had to really think about it. I first wanted to start it right by the theater, but I didn't want to have people hanging out by the theater, which is old and flammable. And so I got it set off to the side, and it goes right up between two of the cabins, trying not to infringe on anybody's privacy, and wends its way up across a few ledges, meeting the Guardian Trail just up above the little bridge where the bridge used to be on the trail. It's just about a mile. It's a great connector for the Guardian Trail. And turns out, by connecting with the Guardian Trail from that angle, you can then go down to the Guardian Trail and walk back down to your car on Camelot Road. Turns out that's a very popular walk for people. And it's, being a southern exposure like that, it almost, if I rake it once at the end of when the leaves are down, it stays clear for the sun helps clear it. Most of the winter, it rarely really ices up. Having said that, though, we're back to the beginning of the conversation. It's like people have to always be serious about walking on our trails around here. I don't care how little, how level they are in this time of year.
Ice is ice.
And it's not even just ice. It's like I know as a trail maker, I get very tired of people wearing the wrong shoes, even when it's like, say, when it's muddy, and then walking around mud puddles.
Yep.
Making trails wider, which then I have to try to fix up.
Yep.
And we should all emphasize that to everybody as much as we can, the importance of everybody wearing important footwear.
Yeah.
I had a guy come up to a group hike on the Bird Cliff Trail a few years ago in flip-flops.
Nice. Mm-hmm.
And I said to him, "Excuse me, sir, but do you have other shoes you could change into?" Well, I didn't know I was going to be critiqued on my footwear.
Wow.
So I told him he couldn't come because I wasn't going to carry him down.
Yeah. usually say to them when I see that, I'm like, this is not going to be fun for you, especially going down. You're going to break them.
Yeah.
It's just that they don't understand.
Yeah. So there's always stuff to do, and Glenn and I went in and explored since there's no signs up, we figured we could get away with it. We went in and explored the Terramore property last week, I think. And we found a lot of very interesting stuff. Some walls and cairns that could well be very old, and
Nice.
possibly one more thing that they'll need to explore.
Is it documented yet?
Well, he made a pretty good video. He made a pretty good video of it. It should tweak people's curiosity at least.
Ooh, excellent. Those Native American cairns are a lot of people are chatting about it from the episode I had with Glenn, and he explained a lot of good stuff, and people are just like me are like, wow, why are they here? What are they shaped like? Where are they pointing to? What do they mean? It's awesome questions. Like, it's some cool stuff.
It's very interesting stuff. I've been studying for 30, almost 40 years now, and it's hard to come up with a lot that's very definitive about it. Okay. But I really believe and really feel that they are special, that most of them are special places, that they are related to everything Indian. I think many of them are burial.
Interesting.
And what I found so interesting is that many of the cairns, they're always around springs.
Yeah.
Now, springs are sacred worldwide because it's the source of water, the source of life.
Yeah.
Not very complicated, really. And most native peoples everywhere in the world always considered, therefore, water to be sacred, and which belatedly now we're sort of catching up to that. And yep, that's right.
Yep.
Absolutely. Can't live without it. And so I think it's kind of interesting that half these cairns that are burial are built on springs. Is it because they're returning somebody's burnt bones or somebody back to the source of life? Are they trying to complete a great circle? And I mean, like the Woodstock Valley, I think was probably always a very special place.
Mm.
There was a legend I first heard when I came up here in the late 60s that the Indians never lived in the Woodstock Valley, that they would only bury their dead here.
Interesting.
And what's interesting about that, it is sort of where a couple, maybe three different tribes' territories joined or overlapped. And we do know that many times tribes would, if they were engaging in hostilities for different reasons, that they would suspend hostilities for spiritual reasons, because they considered Manitou or spirit, they knew it was greater than themselves and their issues, their problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was kind of fascinating that there's never been found to be any evidence in the Woodstock Valley of anybody having lived here. And the only place I've heard of that there's evidence for a clan having lived, I think, was Minkalo.
Interesting.
Which would account for the many Indian ghost stories in Minkalo. And also, as time goes by and we explore Minkalo, it is just like tremendous amount of features up there. A very interesting place. More and more, every time we go up there, we find more structure. Yeah, more mega walls, more cairns. But I wonder if Woodstock. I noticed that the band of springs on the southern slopes of Guardian and south peak of Overlook, many cairns, but they're all within bands of 900 to 1,100 foot.
Mm.
And I think I think Como, what we call the Como property now, I think that was an ancient place of where they may have initiated the burial process. They may have had platforms there that exposed skeletons to the sky for sky burial. So our vulture friends that we are around here in season may have been here for many, many years, long time. And they may have served the same purpose here that they do in Tibet, cleaning the bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Then possibly there was a clan of bone breakers or a shaman that lived.
Interesting. Yeah, a lot of questions. Definitely a lot of question marks.
Yeah, that lived here that then maybe broke the bones, burnt them, because the Lenape had a 1 year mourning period. Possibly in that one, I surmise, I don't know, not an expert, but I surmise that they, in that 1 year mourning period, would cut their hair, which was really very serious for them. That was a very definite sign of mourning. And maybe in that year, they built a memorial cairn. Built a cairn, not just a memorial, but maybe a cairn where the burnt bones would be placed in a year later. Of course, we will never find any evidence of that because mice eat bones, and weather over hundreds of years will help them break down. But I think it is fascinating that, again, places where a lot of these cairns are is where springs are. Again, are they completing this great cycle?
Mm.
And some of the cairns have quartzite, white quartzite stones on a southern aspect. Did they have an inkling of the frequencies of the radio frequencies of quartz, or its ability to channel energy, and facing south, the direction of life? Like you said, just brings up more questions.
Yeah. And we'll get into some of that definitely a little bit later when we talk about your knowledge of the Catskills. Yeah, I just thank you for that, Dave. That's a lot of great information, and just a tiny bit about Native American heritage. So that's
I'm willing to pass on what what I'm learning.
And it's fantastic knowledge. I love it. I actually just went up Hawkett last week with my friend Brandon and checked out those sites up there.
Trying to get up in there. I haven't been there yet.
Oh, it's pretty neat. It's a little different. It looks like it's there's more scattered cairns up there than what is like, West Hill and Lewis Hollow and Mink Hollow and stuff like that. It's more scattered, smaller ones and then bigger ones. It's definitely got to be like GPS documented, and I plan on doing that sometime with Glenn.
Good.
But yeah, went up there. It was nice. Bare booted the whole thing. Had our spikes with us. Had a nice dusting at the top. Signed in, and then went back down and went home. It's a nice quick hike.
I was gonna say it sounds like a perfect hiking weather too.
Yep. Right when you get at the top, you shed down your layers and you're freezing your butt off, and then you get back on.
Yep. Good for you.
Yeah. Catskill News, Sharon Klein. I really appreciate your cleanup at Peekamoose, the trailhead, the Peekamoose Blue Hole. So thank you very much for doing that cleanup. She cleaned up like 3 or 4 bags of garbage. I think a bear got into something, so spread it all over the place. So
good work, Sharon.
Yeah, Sharon, thank you so much. Once again, I always teach and preach about volunteering. Get out and volunteer. I have links in the show notes, links on my podcast page. Check it out. So, David, we usually go into Catskill Mountain history, but tonight we're going to talk about some good Catskill Mountain history because we're going to talk about the ancient trails and logging trails and ancient history of some of the Catskills. So, we'll skip that. We'll go right into our guest of the night, Dave Holden.
Let's go.
I call him the Woodstock Explorer because his knowledge of Woodstock and the surrounding area of the Catskills is fascinating. So welcome to the show, David.
Thank you, Stash. Good to be here.
Glad to have you. Can't wait to hear some stories and stuff. So, Dave, how about you give a little background about yourself to start off the day?
All right. Moved around a lot when I was a kid because, like I mentioned earlier, my dad was one of the very first parajumpers in the Air Force, and so he had to travel around training everybody in this new field. I was very fortunate, though, that 6 years between when I was 7 and 13 were spent in Maine, and my dad being the ace woodsman that he was, we spent a lot of time in the woods, and it's very interesting because some of the echoes of it came full circle to here, because I used to explore all these old foundations and old walls in the woods, and I was like, I wondered why. Obviously, they were abandoned, and why and how, and but of course, with my young imagination too, I pictured them as Indian trails, and I pictured settlers on them, and so it was pretty cool when I got older and I started understanding a little more about what I was seeing there. What I was seeing was old farms that had been abandoned in the 1800s and overgrown. Some of the first wagon trains that went west were people leaving central Maine from a period of huge floods.
Wow.
In the 1840s. And reason being, sheep. They had let sheep completely denude their landscape.
Oh, wow.
So that there was nothing to hold the soil anymore. And they didn't understand this. But it was also the source of a lot of some of the walls probably were sheep walls, some of the lower walls. And so it was kind of interesting. Then later on, I end up in Mendocino in California, flew in early one morning, and walking around Mendocino wondering why it looked so familiar, so much like home. Well, that's where one of those first wagon trains ended up.
Wow.
But it's kind of interesting that I started exploring old roads really when I was 10, 11. And I wish I'd paid more attention now, of course. That's one thing you learn as you get older. Like, oh, shit. Wish I paid a little more attention back then. But here we are. And
yep.
It was really Al Fevers that really piqued my interest. I mean, I fell in love with the Catskills right away. I love Maine. It's still my favorite place to vacation, probably. But the Catskills and the Hudson I'm just completely enraptured by, and I never get tired of. And Al Fevers and I became friends back in the 70s, late 70s, when Guy first called him to have him explain to me why he thought that the Como property should be saved, and for him to tell me some of the history of the Como property. And we just became close friends more and more after that. I loved to hang out and have him tell me stories about the Catskills. And also, what was interesting was that he was always infirm. So I ended up exploring on his behalf in many ways. A lot of ways I was his legs. He would tell me about things, and I go check it out. And one thing in particular was that in 1820, when Greater Shandaken split off from Woodstock, and it's hard to believe, but Shandaken was once part of Woodstock.
Oh, wow.
Woodstock is a big enough town as it is, 20 miles wide, 10 miles, north to south. And to think that it was like, twice again as big at one point kind of boggles the mind.
Mm.
And that's why Lake Hill has the nickname Little Shandaken.
Interesting.
But unfortunately, when that happened in 1820, supposedly there were all the old highway supervisors always had maps of their old roads. But evidently the maps of Woodstock's old roads were lost in the move. So without knowing it, I set about 30 years of trying to map out Woodstock's old roads again, which is what I did. And
wow.
Not all of them, but I've got most of them. And I like to think in the time I have left, another 30, 40 years, maybe I can finish the process.
Awesome.
I think I showed you that one sketch map, right? That showed you some of the roads.
Oh, heck yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of lines on there.
Yeah. And I would keep coming back, and Alf would tell me, "Oh yeah, that's where this, that's where that," and it was really a fun process. And I was definitely younger. It was definitely go for hours and hours, and I'm really glad I did. I think it's an important part of Woodstock.
Definitely. Of Catskills history.
And there's so many. Well, I've learned in the course of this to tell the difference between a quarry road and a farm road. And there actually are some roads that are combination quarry and farm. And then there's roads that are barely discernible, which were probably hemlock roads, because the weight of the hemlock bark on the wagons wasn't so heavy to have left a real trace. But you might see a corridor going through the woods otherwise, and that could well be where that came from. And even then, later on, going through his photographs that he left to the guild, Glenn and I both helped collate and organize a lot of his materials. He had some photographs, for instance, from Ohio Mountain looking north towards overlooking Guardian. And of course, you see that there's nothing on the lower halves of all these mountains. It was all meadows and fields. But the upper halves, you could see there was something there. And I understand now that it was blueberries.
Oh, yeah.
Because blueberries were huge around here in season and in a good season. It was one of the few cash crops that locals might get in the course of a year.
Yeah, that's why they burned the places to get those blueberry bushes up.
Exactly. The settlers learned from the Indians that if you burned out the mountain laurel, you would increase the blueberry growth. Because, let's see, mountain laurel, blueberry, wild azalea, and wintergreen, heath plants, they're related. Mm. But the difference between the mountain laurel and the blueberry, obviously, is that the mountain laurel way outgrows blueberry. Now, the Indians, they wanted more blueberry because it made their hunting so much easier. Because every animal and every bird would come to the blueberry patches. And so all they had to do was set up around the blueberry patches, and they could pretty much get whatever game they wanted. And plus having a ton of blueberries. And now the settlers took that in a different way, burning back the mountain laurel to increase the blueberries for commercial purposes, which was still dicey, iffy, because it depended on the season. This year, if the winter stays mild like this, all the blueberries should be fine. We should have a great mountain laurel bloom, because the deer won't be eating the buds, and the blueberries should be fine. And although I'm not sure that's worth having a mild winter for, but
yeah, right.
There it is. Yeah, I know. And so there's all these great stories about people being up at the hotel, and they would decide to burn out the berries, and everybody that came up to the hotel to get the fresh air would suddenly have clouds of smoke from burning mountain laurel come sweeping through. They weren't happy about it. Maybe some of the blueberry people thought that was funny. I don't know. But, no, and then Alf writes about, in a good season, everybody would drop everything. This is in the 1800s, even up into the very early 1900s. Everybody would drop everything to go up into the hills to pick the blueberries. And to the point where he also describes people around the Hudson watching every boat on the Hudson. And this is it. So we're talking August here. And I can really relate. Because as a kid, I used to pick blueberries in Maine in August, and never pick as much and make as much money as the adults did with their bigger rakes. But when I think of hot August weather, I'm always reminded of blueberry picking. And my friends and I had a nickname for that month, like our Indian nickname for August. We would call it when the bears have blue teeth.
Yeah.
because we would always bump into them in the blueberry thickets. And
Yep.
So Alf writes about every boat that could be loaded with blueberries on a good season would be raced down the river on the outgoing tide, its decks buried in chipped ice from the very last ice from the ice houses along the river. Remember, the ice houses had walls were 6 feet thick with hay, stuffed with hay to insulate the ice. But it wouldn't make it for a whole year, but they'd still have ice in August for exactly these purposes. And people would describe watching the steamers and the sloops going down the river with trails of water vapor.
Wow.
From the hot air hitting the ice as they're all racing on the outgoing tide. Isn't that a great image?
Yeah, right.
But of course, again, you can't depend on that because not every year is it going to be a good season like that.
So when did you start? When did you come to the Woodstock Catskills area?
I got here 2 weeks after the festival.
Oh wow, 1969. Wow.
Yeah, pure serendipity. Friend of mine lived with on Beacon Hill the winter before. Had come here to study harp with Muddy Waters. That'll come into the story in just a bit. Meanwhile, I had tickets for the festival, but the place I was working at in Boston, my wallet was stolen. My tickets were stolen.
Oh my God.
I didn't know I could have just come here anyway.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly. And so I hitched down to Provincetown about 2 weeks after the festival. I'm in an all-night club. My friend Kathy and her new boyfriend, Aloysius, drove in his hearse and drove all night to Provincetown. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, recognized me from the back across a crowded club, smoky. Hey, Holden. And I mean, there's the thin threads that our lives hang on sometimes,
Yeah.
And asked me if I wanted to go out to Race Point Beach with them, watch the sunrise. And as you do in your 20s, a little more than you do later on, I said, why not? So I did that and hung out with them out there for a while. They asked me if I wanted to come back to Woodstock with them. Same thing. I said, why not? My little shoulder bag, and first came to Woodstock in a hearse.
That's very ironic.
The very end of August, 69. Yeah. And I was really glad to get here for that last couple of years of the old Woodstock, and nobody locked their doors.
Yeah.
And I still love it. It's my home. And luckily, I never expected it not to change because it's a very dynamic place. But I'm glad I got to see a little bit of the old Woodstock. And it took me a few years bouncing back and forth, but I finally realized for the first time in my life I had a home.
Nice.
And picked a crazy place for a home, but that's okay.
Excellent. You'll have to tell me about that later.
Yeah.
So now, when you came here, did you start right away exploring the Catskills like you did up in Maine and stuff?
Pretty much. Once I sort of got my feet on the ground here, I got curious and started poking around, and immediately fell in love with. I immediately fell in love with the place, and I don't remember a whole lot specifically about some of that early period. I have some very good excuses for that. And it was also at that point I started out on our very early rescue squad, which I continued with for a total of 15 years before it was incorporated. And trying to think this. So that's part of my concern when we talk about people being careful in the woods. I've helped with search and rescues before, and I know what it's like from the other side.
Yeah.
and everybody that does that, they love what they do. They're dedicated. They're very careful, and nobody I know that's into search and rescue would ever say people shouldn't go into the woods. But we would just hope that people would be more careful and more considerate of each other and themselves. That's all. You know? Now, what was interesting about my exploring all the old roads and trails was that over time, I started noticing all these cairns, all these stone structures, not all of which were cairns. But I started studying them, and luckily I also started making note of them, mapping them. I'm the only one I know of that's made a map of a lot of the what I call early sites in the town. And my focus has been mostly in Woodstock. Okay. I love going up the West Kill. I love, and I'm looking forward to going to Halkett, and I love the Gunks, but my focus has always been Woodstock. And I would like to map out all this stuff, both the old roads and all these features, is one of my goals. I've gotten a start, and part of the reason, I think a good reason to do so is because when we do this, I think it's less likely that they will be haphazardly destroyed. Yeah. And I try to be my own devil's advocate. I believe much of this is probably native. I feel in my heart much of this stuff is native. But the point is for me is to record it and try to start the process of preserving it, and so that we can take time to determine exactly what's the scoop here. That's the whole purpose of the Overlook Mountain Center. I first, in my explorations of Overlook, I first came across all the stone structures in Lewis Hollow early on. But every time I would come back through there, it would just pique my interest more and more.
Definitely.
And I started mapping them and making note of them. And that's when I joined NERA, because NERA was the only group I knew at that point that was trying to study and understand these things.
NERA is Northeastern
New England Antiquities Research Association.
Okay. Yep. Sorry.
I've been a member for about most of 40 years, I think.
Wow.
And of course, Glenn was, I think, vice president or president for several years there. So what happened with Lewis Hollow was that I just kept, every time I would explore every different level, I would just be amazed. And what was amazing about it was that the sacred precinct there, the lands now protected by Overlook Mountain Center, it's all concentrated in one huge enclosure, like 39 acres, I believe. Wow. But it's enclosed in these walls. That's not by happenstance, and now we know there's 300, maybe even 400 small cairns, and of course we've got the great cairns, 6 or 7 great cairns, and really interesting how that unfolded, because when Glenn was really involved with struggle about the cell tower in California Quarry, we were talking, and I told him about the cairns over there, and I showed them to him. He was thinking that they might help it in the struggle about the cell tower, but that's also when he just got really interested in, and I showed him the whole site. Everything just went on from there. He was so that later on we're just talking more and more about how we're going to protect this, and then of course the people that owned it, one of whom was one of his cousins, we thought the place was going to be protected, but then his cousin, there was one of the owners of it, died, and then the other owners decided to sell it. So here we find it on the multiple listing, and we have visions of McMansions. Yeah. Up in there, and we freaked out. And I mean, and for good reason. entertain visions of having to chain myself to bulldozers.
Yep.
Because I just knew it wouldn't be right. And we were really at a loss for a while. And then, luckily, my friend Miriam Burke got turned onto it and loved it and decided to buy it.
Nice.
And that's, from then on, it's when it's been basically secure. It's because she only wants it to be, I should say, her estate now. It's to only be preserved. It's never to be developed. And so huge relief. But of course, that's, as that goes on, that's continuing because we're also trying to figure out what's the best way to protect and preserve it into the future. And along with Glenn, I'm on the board of the Overlook Mountain Center, and a bunch of us that love the place and are looking to protect it. And, we're doing it.
That's good.
Have you been there?
I have not yet.
Oh,
I've been very near it.
Oh, we'll have to change that soon. Okay.
Yes, definitely. So now you were a close friend to Alf Evers. If anybody doesn't know who Alf Evers is, you need to get yourself a book of the Catskills because Alf definitely he was a famous historian of Woodstock and the Catskills, let alone he was explorer.
Yeah, he was 25 years the town historian. He wrote Woodstock, History of an American Small Town, and he wrote the Catskills.
Is it the Catskill Country one?
No. Nope, this is his original book.
Oh, the one, yes, From Wilderness to Woodstock.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Between us, we have a brain here.
Yeah. Late in the week.
He was really great people. I miss him all the time. I was his last 10 years. I mean, the guy had the wisdom to know when he needed to stop driving at 90. Or he said he spun out on 28 and he told me, "That's it. I'm not driving anymore." Gave his car to his daughter. How many old people have that sense?
Right.
And just so many things about him. A lot of people don't know, but him and his wife wrote many different children's books when he was younger. And one of his books, The Treasure of Watchdog Mountain, is actually considered the first environmental children's book.
Oh, wow.
And the Watchdog Mountain was Overlook, and the treasure was the land itself.
Nice. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Woodstocker Books, we published it several years back. And I know it's available at the library.
Wow. Now, what did you from being all that time with Alf and stuff like that? How many years do you think you were friends with him?
15 years.
So as things went on, you learned more and more of him because he was just spewing out all the information about the Catskills and everything.
That and we were just best of friends. We talked about everything. We talked about our own lives, our women, life in general. He'd tell me about getting older, and I'd shovel his driveway. I drove him. I was his driver for a number of years. I would shovel his driveway and trim his. He had a hemlock maze up in the back. I would trim for him, and we both loved maps.
Nice.
And yeah, he was. One thing I'll never match him, or it'll be very hard for anybody I know to match him. Was he was that old-fashioned type of researcher with an incredible memory, almost eidetic memory. I remember one time he was telling me, "Oh yeah, first got off the ferry at Rondout. I think I was 9 years old. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and in 1910 or something." He said, and I'm going like, "Shit."
What did I have for breakfast this morning?
Really, exactly. And Ed Sanders, who went through much of his books and doing his research and writing his book about Alf I think he was amazed at how many, we were all amazed at, he had like thousands of 3x7 index cards. Because that's what the old researchers had to make notes on, you know. And he had a wonderful book collection, which got split up between the Guild, the library, and the Historical Society.
So the time with him was good and knowledgeable, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
Nice.
And matter of fact, I think some of my writing is very influenced by him. I think because some of my nature writing is very colloquial.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you. And because that's how he writes in his books. It's very easy reading, very colloquial, like real world type of. It was not like a researcher that was above it all.
Mm.
And he knew, and actually, in getting into modern Woodstock history, of course, he knew a lot of the people that he wrote about. So it was just the best people.
Nice.
We were so lucky to have him. Almost made it to 100.
Crazy. I that's just awesome. He's definitely a Catskill legend. I mean, yeah. We all know that who know the Catskills. So
yep.
So these you sent me a lot of stuff about the ancient trails and abandoned roads that I looked through thoroughly. I loved it.
Well, I'm going to be reviving the lecture that I used to do on it. Ancient Trails, Old Roads, Paths to the Future.
Mm-hmm.
And because when I started really thinking about it, I saw this huge pattern of these east-west, north-south trails going all through the region. You know, of course, through the town, but then I saw it happening through the region. You get the old mine road, which became 209, and you get the old trail that went up over the Esopus watershed. I don't like to call it the Onteora trail anymore because we know that Onteora is a fake name.
Okay, nice.
Onteora was a fake Indian word made up by the Indian agent to sound flowery. In the 1800s, the Lenape, the Mohican, were out of the area. We had displaced them. We had forced them to move. And now don't get me wrong. I love the Hudson Valley School of Art. Okay, but what you have to keep in mind at the same time, when they were developing the hotels, we were filling this space that was now void by the original people that lived here. And so what they were trying to do, like on old maps of Overlook in the hotel days, there's all these cute Indian names, like the Minnehaha Spring and, Sunrise Rock and Onteora land where the sky meets earth was supposed to romanticize something. I think a lot of it was white guilt. Mm-hmm. Okay. But trying to get, make people come up to the hotels, and which people wanted to do more and more anyway, because as time went by, the city was getting smokier and smokier. So people came up here to get the air. The Catskills in some ways were the first ecotourism
in
the United States. So in my lecture, those like you saw in those maps, I want to show that what a busy place this was in that time, and how all these old roads intersect down at the Rondout. And actually, everybody always forgets about one of the oldest roads, and that's the river.
Right along the river, yep.
Yep, because at the mouth of every major creek were trading places and villages. And so what I intend to do, what I did with my previous lecture, and I just have to polish it off now, is I want to show people that how many of our roads are built on ancient trails. I want people to appreciate where we're traveling, where people have always traveled many times. And of course, I bring up some of the less well-known things like the Wagonk Road, there's the Wispel Road, and the long trail, not to be confused with the long path.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll tell you a little bit about that in a moment. But then I also, I try to explore, like, why were these roads there? What were they doing? Well, because people were trading. And we now know that the Esopus Ridge from Kingston to Saugerties there's immense quarries back there and ancient quarries of chert, so that whatever tribe, whatever peoples that were in control of that were very powerful. And so they had to control the watersheds. And interestingly, around all the watersheds, there's always cairns. There's always places where evidence that people had been.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I mean, like, again, in Ulster County, I think the chert was a big deal. Tools and weapons.
Yep.
And there was no reason for anybody to be trading fish here. Everybody had fish. And now to go on to the future, I wrote a letter. I'm very happy with the article that I wrote for the Chronogram when the rail trail opened. And its title was Path to the Future, because I point out in the article that many of those old trails were followed by railroads. Like the railroad, the D&H, before that, whatever its name was before that, before it was the D&H, it came over the watershed from Delaware County. It followed that older Indian trail. And yes, it went down into the reservoir, what's now the reservoir.
Mm.
And of course, they had to move it when they made the reservoir. But
the Delaware and Ulster, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, or whether it's D&H or DNU, not positive. But it's like this progression through time.
Mm.
And there is no doubt the importance that railroads had in making Ulster County.
Yep.
Or destroying it, depending on which way you want to look at it.
Exactly, yeah.
Because we can't forget the origins of the Catskill Park was because the place was virtually destroyed.
Yeah. Tanning and quarries and stuff like that.
Yep. And so I do see, like, the rail trails as a path to the future. The railroads had their time. They had an important role, but the railroads are basically history now here.
Yep.
And as you can tell, I am a big proponent, always have been a big proponent of the rail trail. I followed that whole thing all the way through. Yes, if there could have been a place where maybe they could have done both, but it's not to be. And I understand why anybody that doesn't understand why the DEP wouldn't want trains running right next to the reservoir is not really thinking.
Yeah.
Creosote leaching from ties, oil dripping from.
Yeah.
And we're just talking about on good days.
Yeah, and then the smoke and all the.
We're not talking about accidents, right? That's true. And that brings us to fire towers, because one of the reasons why the fire towers were built was because of fires, and one of the causes of fires was from trains.
Yep, sparks from trains.
Yep.
What trails can we like that we're hiking are ancient trails? I mean, all these trails going up on top of the mountains. The Indians didn't want to go up there. They just didn't want to waste time because they knew nothing would be up there. There'd be no life. They'd rather stay down in the valleys. Are there any trails that you know that are?
It's not that. I don't think it's that simple, though, Stash. From what I've studied, Indians had trails up and down all over. Not exactly PUDs, but.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah, they weren't dumb. Unlike white people these days.
Yeah. No, they had they had summer trails and winter trails. They like to. I think they were too smart to go along the river bottoms in the summer if they could help it. And this is the ones that were here. Don't forget, most of the tribes of the Northeast spent most of the individual tribes would spend their summers on the shore.
Mm.
Includes Maine all the way down to here, but the people that did stay, they had trails running high up that they were walking the summer because it would catch the breeze.
Yeah.
And okay, like the Wagonk Road, which it took me a while to figure out exactly what it was. It starts on 28. We know where it starts, but then it disappears at that huge quarry, which is 850 Route 28 LLC. Now, I was able to determine that it actually went up over the hill and came down at Xena. And Alf believed that it was the original road to Woodstock. Actually, Alf Evers believes, and he writes about it in this book, Wagonk was the original name for Woodstock. Wonder how close we came to having a Wagonk festival.
Right.
You know? On the oldest maps from the 1700s, you see in the Woodstock Valley, you see the word Wagonk. Different spellings. Sometimes AWAGH-KONK, sometimes just WAGH.
Mm.
The WAU seems to be a later, more of a Dutch spelling. We don't know exactly what it means. My good friend Evan Pritchard, who I'd love to see you have on here at some point, I believe it was something like Land of Waterfalls Under the Sacred Mountain, because I think Overlook, for many different reasons, was a goal of a spiritual goal for many people, a place where people prayed, but so that in the very early 1800s, maybe very like 1780s, Judge Livingston, I think the son of the chancellor, was writing home, and he wrote, "We've been having a very good winter here in Wagonk." He crossed it out and wrote Woodstock, which is where the Livingstons were from Woodstock, England. That was the first official reference I think that's known about to Woodstock. And before that, it was Wagonk. And so that road, and it's rutted. It's deeply rutted. It's very definitely a quarry road. And it would make sense because in wet season, the reason why they made plank roads, don't forget, like 28 was, particularly at Stony Hollow, was wet.
Yep.
And most of the roads in the valleys were impassable in the wet season, so they went over the mountains. And according to, I found materials from the town of Kingston's historian Harry Simpson, where he talks about that road as being an old Indian trail.
Interesting.
And I believe it. And so then it would have come up, and they would have taken the Lynch Road, which would have been a left off of Sawkill Road, coming up over Chestnut Hill Road to Woodstock. And the other old road is called the Wispel Road. Very interesting. It was an old road that went from Lake Hill to Wittenberg, went straight up the north slope of Tobias, and then down, coming out by the firehouse Wittenberg. And it made total sense. Consider that in the 1800s, Lake Hill, which was commonly called Little Shandaken at that point, was really the population center of the township of Woodstock. Very few people lived in the eastern part of town. It was basically tanneries and a few farms. And it wasn't until I think the hotel really started up on the mountain, that there was more and more traffic through town, and it changed over. I'm not sure exactly when, but and what's interesting thing about the Wispel Road, it was Jim Davis, a friend of mine who was related to the Esopus people. He and I were on the Environmental Commission together years back, and when he was a kid, his father and grandfather used to drive that old road. It actually connects. It's part of it is buried under the reservoir now, and he believes that it's part of what was called the Long Road, going from the St. Lawrence to the Delaware. Because Wispel Road, when you continue it north, it becomes Mink Hollow Road, going up through that pass over to the Schoharie watershed. And again, there's the mink and everything going on there. And it would have gone up. I'm pretty sure I know where it goes up over Tonchi now. There's an old road that cuts up probably between Tonchi and Tysonac, and would have continued under where the reservoir is and joining up what we now call 214, and then going down to the 209 and the old mine road. But isn't that to think of people possibly traveling on one road from the St. Lawrence to the Delaware?
Right. That's a long distance.
Yeah.
Very long.
And I don't have a whole lot of evidence about that, Jim. Unless Jim wrote some stuff down. I'm going on conjecture, basically. But hopefully, somewhere down the pike, I'd like to nail that down. It's pretty interesting, though, isn't it?
Yeah. That's definitely one hell of a road, especially back in the days when you traveled by horse and buggy. And I remember reading stuff about people taking days or weeks to come up from New York City to go up here and to vacation out here, but it would take horse and buggy at least I think it was 9 days or something like that to get up here. Yeah.
Well, when I first started exploring up in Spruceton, up in the Westkill Valley, I mean, that's really, you can't get there from here.
Deep in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it's such a drive. Now, it's hard to imagine, but if you lived in the upper part of the Westkill Valley 100 years ago, the easiest way for you to get here would be to go down into cross 214 and go up to Willow. Don't forget the Silver Hollow Road used to go all the way through.
Yep.
And coming out pretty much opposite what's the trail that goes down from
Diamond Notch?
Yes, thank you. But evidently that would take a day.
Yeah.
To do
That's
that.
Crazy.
Yeah. And actually that was pretty cool when I was first exploring up there. That's when I first found that site. All those cairns up there. That's a pretty fantastic site, isn't it?
It's very fantastic. It's very stable. That's what I think. It's very neat.
Yeah.
Let's just say that.
Yes.
So some of these ancient trails, what have they taught us? Behind your research and stuff like that, what have they taught us?
Well, we have to remember that other people have walked our path before us, and that's a responsibility that's left for us, is how do we walk the same paths and not leave evidence, or to only leave good stuff behind us. I mean, maybe it sounds kind of trite, but it's really a lot of the same lessons. And because what does history ever teach us? But how to live today.
Yeah.
And for instance, you look at this. There's places where you see a beautiful. I mean, I can't tell you how much I love old roads. I'm hiking with people. I'm just driving. I'm going places, and I'll see this dent going across a hillside that nobody else sees, and I'll know it was an old road of some kind. And okay, because that's what I do. I find old roads that are only visible when there's snow. Sometimes, there's the faintest dent in in the ground. But point being that in the days when people were walking or just driving wagons, it was a beautiful long curve to go up around the slope of a mountain. They went with the landscape. Now we chop the whole end of the mountain off so we can drive up there at 50 miles an hour.
As fast as possible. Let's get there as quick as possible.
Yes. And in doing so, we miss so much.
We miss the enjoyment of the landscape.
Yes. And I understand it's just the way it is to a degree, but I hope to try to learn from it, and I hope that the land allows me to be able to learn from it and to see it. And, well, everything that we can protect and preserve, we should.
Yeah.
Because the pressure on the land is only going to grow.
Yep.
What are the odds 50 years from now, say nothing about 100 years from now, that the Catskill Park will be intact? I mean, you see all these babies, all these children. Where do people think they're going to live?
Right.
Yeah, the pressure on the land is only going to grow. And modern planners think that they have it rough now. I think their challenge is only going to grow.
Yeah.
As we develop the fine points of cluster building,
Yep.
of self-sufficiency.
Yep. And then you got the natural disasters and stuff like that, and the changing climate.
Well, which brings me to one other thing, if you don't mind me mentioning. It's kind of something. I guess somebody could say that it's something I've been harping on for years. It pops up in my writings pretty consistently. A piece I wrote not that long ago called Catskills Wildfires, and it has a lot to do with what we're talking about. And I don't know how we're going to do it. I talked with Jeff Centerman about it, and I've talked with different people on the county level, and hopefully at some point we'll get a group like the Catskill Center to be an overarching entity that can get everybody else to start removing this incredible amounts of underbrush that are in the woods,
mm-hmm.
and somehow to start trimming back the mountain laurel. Maybe controlled burns. I know that's not easy, but somehow, somewhere, because all you have to do is see the fires that they had in Northern California 2 years ago.
Oh yeah, yep.
And for instance, if this winter continues the way it's going, I mean, I hope not. We dodged the bullet. Right. We dodged the bullet last year. I don't want to be a harbinger, but I worry. I do worry about the forest. I love the forest. I love the trees. I don't want to see them suffer. I don't want to see everything that everybody's worked so hard to build in these towns and in the woods, in their homes.
Yep.
I don't want to see them all destroyed, because also the villages are just as much in danger with as many trees that are in the villages. Although, which is kind of confusing, because then you look at some of the old pictures from the 20s, and Woodstock was just all old trees. So, but you used to be able to. People used to be able to let the fires go.
Yep.
Yes, the fire towers were set up so that they could pinpoint whenever there was a fire that was anywhere close to a town, then they could fight it. And of course, then airplanes came along, but now everybody's building homes in the mountains. Everybody loves to have mountain laurel, which is just as flammable as mesquite.
Mm.
Mountain laurel is extremely flammable.
Yeah, the bark is thin.
Yeah, people love to have it right next to their homes. Nobody's got fireproof shingles right now, and everybody loves to have pine trees over their house.
Yeah.
Now we've dodged this bullet for a long time, but see, the thing is, and actually, Alf was one of the first people that ever talked. Alf saw this happening because he knew the history of fire in the Catskills, and he was the one that taught me about that. So in a way, I'm carrying on his legacy in that sense. And I would like to see us, what are the odds that we can get politicians to come up with the money? It's going to cost a lot of money, for municipalities to go into the woods and pull out but I mean, maybe there's ways to do it. I've heard that there's large vacuums they can take in now. I've heard, different ways that maybe we can. I prefer to think positive.
Yeah, I agree.
But it's something that's really going to have to be dealt with because, part of me is skeptical.
Yeah, of course.
I see, I could see a couple of years from now, people going like, "Oh no, how did this happen? Where did we go wrong?" And if we could learn from, like in Southern California, where in the hill fires they had east of LA, all those like high-end housing developments burnt right up.
Yep.
It was a real disaster. That was 10 years ago, something like that, maybe 15. Well, maybe a clue for us is that local zoning, they changed it so you had to have 100 feet of lawn around your house. You couldn't have mesquite next to your house. No trees overhead, and you had to have fireproof shingles. That's the new zoning codes in that part of the world now, because they learned. Now, mark of intelligence is, I believe, to learn from other people's mistakes. So let's see how intelligent a region we have here.
Yeah.
And I know I'm preaching to the choir. I know you feel the same way. Somehow, we just got to get the word out that we just have to work on it.
Yeah. And that also brings kind of like the next question and somewhat of the last question. The protection of these sacred trails. It's definitely got a lot. You got to do a lot to protect these, right?
That's true. And a challenge for us here in New York State. Vermont state law mandates that a municipality cannot sell an old road. There's no such law in New York State. I know numerous woodstock roads or other roads in other towns that are now driveways are inaccessible to you and me.
Yeah.
And but it explains why Vermont has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles of trails. And because people always say, I took somebody on a hike last year that, in England, you can hike everywhere because, yes, it's because that kind of sensibility has been incorporated there for generations. And 99.9% of the time, everybody that walks on those roads, those paths, respects the rules and the people whose land they're crossing. And we're so behind the curve on that one. It takes, like, for instance, like for us to make the Wagonk Road into a hiking trail, it's actually not going to be so difficult as it had been since Woodstock Land Conservancy owns a couple more parcels of it now, and DEC owns a parcel or two of it. And so, in other words, that's the kind of thing that you have to knit these things together. It takes work to knit these things all together here now.
Yeah.
It's not inbuilt like in England or even in Vermont. I'm sure there's landowners in Vermont that would rather not have people walking on this old road across their property, but oh well.
Oh well.
Yeah. And so it would be good. I don't see any movement for it, but it would be great if somehow New York State could pass a law where we could at least get the remaining old roads would be remain public somehow.
Yeah.
That's one thing. And
protected.
Yep. And the more rail trails, et cetera, the better. that's growing. I see that they're going to be doing another one up in Shandaken.
Nice.
Yeah. I think I was glad to see, I'm glad to see the slowing down some of the bushwhacking on the peaks, I hope, because I think what was the last one that I went up to, I was surprised at how many herd paths were all through the tops of the,
Yeah, that's definitely a big topic now.
Yeah, how you do that without all these little signs all over,
Yeah.
Got to be a challenge.
Yeah. Well, that's great ideas of, preserving and, like just getting more people to believe that these roads are sacred and that we should keep protecting them any way possible.
Absolutely. And the thing is that it's up to us, because these things are only going to get more of a challenge as time goes by.
Exactly. More power to the people.
Yep. And I really appreciate this, by the way.
Yeah.
And I just went into low power mode.
Okay. Well, we're just getting done with the podcast, so that's good.
How about that?
Go ahead.
Seriously, I seriously appreciate this, Stash. I'm looking forward to. I can see we got some walking to do.
Yes, definitely. One last thing, Dave. I have this Mary T Trail. My friend of mine suggested this post-hike brews and bites. Where do you like to go to get something to eat and drink after hiking or anything? I usually suggest any local place and stuff like that. What's your favorite place?
My tastes are very eclectic on the matter. It's usually if I've been out for a couple hours and I'm hungry, it's like the first place I come to.
Right.
I heard, when you were interviewing Glenn, you guys were talking about the food trucks up in Westkill. That's really a brilliant move on their part, because
hikers are hungry.
Yeah. No, really, no specific recommendation myself. I like them all. I've been to Pika Moose. I love the Phoenicia Diner and the other places in Phoenicia. I tell you what, Bear Cantina has got decent food at decent prices.
What's that called?
The Bear Cantina at the Bearsville Center.
Excellent.
And which is kind of cool, because I'm writing a newsletter for Lizzie Van at the Bearsville Center now, and I'm also probably going to be building a little trail on the property there.
Nice. So yeah. I'll mention that in this. So excellent. Well, Dave, thank you for joining me tonight. I hope you have a good night. Hopefully this weather changes into snow.
Yeah, really. Well, this was a great start for my afternoon and evening, Stash. Thank you very much. And if I'm not sure, seems like we covered a lot of ground.
Oh, we did.
If I missed anything, let me know. And I can see we got more to do and to talk about. Okay.
More hiking. So, have a good night. And we'll talk later. We'll get together.
Thanks a lot.
All right.
Take care.
Hey guys, I just want to thank you for listening to the show. If you enjoyed the show, subscribe and throw down a smooth review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any podcast platform that you use. You can also check daily updates of the podcast, hikes, hiking memes, and local news on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and the official website of the show. Remember this, you just keep on living, man. LIVIN.